Welcome to the Project Whisperer's Guide to Influencing Executive Decision Making. Better executive decisions start with better project leadership, and that's what we are here to do today, is to help grow future generations of project managers and to continue to hone those with experience. So if those of you who are here today, can put in the chat your name, where you are from, and your current title, it'll be great to get to know who is here today. Who am I and why am I talking about this? My name is Katrina McCullough. I'm the founder and CEO of McCullough Management. I am the Project Whisperer. I have almost 20 years of project leadership experience. I have completed 100 projects. I have worked on over $250 million in project budgets, and I have a 100% project success rate. What does that mean? The metrics for project success for me are: number one, the projects went live with meeting the goals and objectives of the project. Number two, they had a high degree of quality. They had a high degree of customer satisfaction. The customer or the client was happy, and they had a high degree of team morale. At the end of the project, the team members liked themselves and liked each other. That is how I consider a project to be successful. My specialties are project rescue. I've spent the bulk of my career going into projects that are either that have failed before or are currently failing, and I've helped put them back on their feet and get them across the finish line. That is my true love. Of course, I can start projects from scratch, do PMO setup. Another thing that I love to do is staffing and training, hiring project team members and training them, not just project managers, but also business systems analysts, project coordinators, change managers, training analysts, anything on that side of the project management world. So that's me. Why are you here today? Why is this something that would interest you? Because you are interested in career growth. Better executive decisions, better project outcomes, better career opportunities. You become seen as a strategic leader. That is career growth, and the opportunities for project managers as you go through are limitless. Everything from vice president of delivery, chief operating officer, senior PMO director. There's huge potential growth for project managers. And this is one of the many tools in your toolkits that can help you get there. Okay. So decision hierarchy. I just want to make sure we're clear on what decisions we're talking about today. So as you go up, there are fewer and fewer decisions. However, they can have greater and greater impacts. And then we're going to talk about which of these groups we're really focusing on today. So as the project team, you need to have autonomy to make your own decisions. Those are the tactical day-to-day decisions that you're making, boots on the ground, and you're making dozens to hundreds of those in any given day or week or month. And then as you go up, you have the department manager. So those are the supervisors or the managers that are in charge of things like who might be on testing, department-specific workflows, communication to that specific department. Then you go up to the steering committee level, and those are the folks that have more of the strategic and overarching decisions and approvals to be made. So they're doing cross-functional impacts, anything that affects a broad audience. They also are the ones that finalize the recommendations that might go to your small group of executive sponsors, whether that's 1 to 3 executive sponsors. And those the sponsors have the final decision-making authority. Now, not every project needs this entire level, obviously, but this is a pretty generic and an example. And you could have department managers that are also on your steering committee, sponsors that are part of your steering committee, etc. Here's what I have found. I have found as you go up, it's actually somewhat easier for the sponsors for decision-making, because by the time it gets to them, it's gone through its decision-making workflow and roadshow. And also, sponsors tend to be in the positions that they're in because of their decision-making abilities. Now, it might be hard to get an audience with them, but we can talk about that later. Then you have the steering committee, and then you have the department managers. And I find within steering committee and department manager, that's where it can get harder to actually make sure that you are getting the decisions to them, teed up to them in a way that they can make fast, effective decisions. So we're going to focus, everything that we talked about today impacts those groups, but impacts those three groups, but we're really focusing, I think, on tier 2 and 3 today, as well as the nice package that you can do for the sponsors. Also, honestly, by the time it gets to the sponsors, because of the nature of their position, we tend to spend a lot more time putting things together for them. And this is going to show you some streamlined ways that you can do that for tier 2 and tier 3 as well. Projects don't move at the speed of information. They move at the speed of decisions. All right, so here's your job as the project manager's role in executive decision making. Obviously, as project managers, rarely are we responsible for the decisions in tiers 2, 3, 4. Those are made by the core strategic leaders of the organization. Our job is to make decision making easy for them. And we're going to talk about all three of these in depth as we go through this, but we need to make sure that they have visibility to what's happening on the ground, to what's really happening with the project, and then context for that. Project context, organizational context. We need to make sure that they understand all of the options that are available to them, what options we recommend, what options were reviewed, but we ultimately didn't choose, and why. We need to create alignment. If there's alignment within the team, it is so much easier for executives to make decisions and then follow through. And obviously follow through on executing the decision. That is, that's relatively simple, but there's so much, or not simple, but standard, but there's so much more to that. For follow through, it's actually making sure that you've communicated effectively to everyone that needs to know the decision, but then you're following that decision through. And we have slides that talk about that, because often once we start to execute a decision, we learn more. And this is what to do with what you're learning as you go, ultimately making those decisions. And this is going to be important for the rest of this. One important trait of a project manager, a successful project manager, I should say. And if you've come to any of my webinars, you've heard me say this over and over again. So I'll say from the beginning, one important trait of a successful project manager is the understanding of and respect for human nature. Very rarely can you change human nature. So everything that you do as a successful project manager is in support of human nature. You're helping people make decisions based on the reality of your organization, the reality of how people work on projects, not where you necessarily hope they might get to, depending on who you're working with and for how long. So because you understand human nature, that empowers you to be a storyteller. So project management is, in essence, storytelling. And everyone says we're not supposed to make decisions from an emotional standpoint, right? We're supposed to be objective. That's true, but we are emotional creatures. That goes back to understanding human nature. We are inherently emotional creatures. We inherently have a need to feel good about the decisions that we're making, to feel safe about the decisions that we're making. Even if it turns out to not be the right decision down the road, which absolutely happens, it was the right decision based on the data that we had at the time. So as project managers, we take the data, we take what happened. Now, data in and of itself does not necessarily lead to the right decision, because data is what is. It's not necessarily the insight. The insight comes with the context. So that's the project context, the organizational context, human context, why it matters, what could happen, what the impacts are. And then this is your magic that you bring as a project manager. You bring your experience. What have you seen in the past? What do you know as project management best practices that is going to work and or could lead to higher risks and could potentially be an issue for your project down the road? So you put that all together and then you give that to your leaders. So now the decision becomes easy to see. There's a statistic that says, let me try that again. There's a statistic that says leaders spend 40% of their time making decisions. So you can just imagine the decision fatigue. And they're making decisions for this project, for this initiative, for this department constantly. The more that you can help them quickly understand what the best decision is going to be for this project, for this particular phase, for this milestone, the easier they can make those decisions, and then the better the outcomes as a result of those decisions, the more they're going to trust you, and the easier it's going to be for them to make the timely, effective decisions for your projects going forward. All right. So here are reasons why leaders sometimes have a difficulty making those quality, timely, effective decisions on projects. And I want to clarify what kind of decisions we're making. We're making everything from signing off on a deliverable that, whether or not we're going to use this module or that module, if it's this workflow or that workflow, to projects, to decisions around, do we need a change order? Do we not need a change order? Do we have the right team members? And these are really difficult. Do we not have the right team members? Do we need to move people off the project? Do we need to add people to the project? Do we need a longer timeline? Those are all of the decisions that I'm talking about. The standard ones that are already included in the project plans, the ones that come up along the way, and the ones that are tied to risks. So what do you do when the leaders are too far from the work? And I've seen a lot of very hierarchical organizations where the people that are making the decisions are often 2 to 3 steps removed from the folks that are actually on the ground doing the work. And it's very hard to make quality decisions when you're missing that context, when you don't really have a sense of what the actual priorities are. So your job as project managers is to create that visibility. So having more regular meetings, I call them meetings before the meetings. That's where you're consistently, you have a regular cadence of meeting with the leaders that are the most accessible to you and making sure that they have a very clear understanding of what's going on the project before you even get to needing to make a decision. And then you need to make sure they're hearing from multiple voices. So sometimes they can't be in every meeting. If you have, 10, 20, 30, 50, 70 people working on a project, it's going to be hard to hear from them. I love anonymous surveys, and we do those regularly on our projects. And we ask questions like, are your voices being heard? Do you understand how your contributions are being used on the project? Do you understand, what the future outcomes are going to be on this? Overall satisfaction. And we ask the Likert scale and then the open-ended questions. So we take that feedback, we bring it to our leaders, and we're showing not just what they've said, but changes that we're making in real time. I never wait for lessons learned at the end. I always do them, but we're continuously refining. It is so important. And we're giving that context to our leaders. And those one-on-one meetings give you a chance to also be a little bit more candid, give a little more of the context off the record before you get to larger meetings where decisions are being made. And build those relationships outside of formal meetings. Go for coffee, go for lunch, stop by, ask them how they're doing, get to know them a little bit, let them get to know you just a little bit. It's a good way when there is conflict to already have that foundation in place. And so there was one time, and I'll give case studies for these, when I joined an organization. And when I got there, the project had been spinning for a while. And the leaders told me, this project is about 50% of the way through. We just need help getting it across the finish line. I said, great. Started doing meetings and quickly found out the project was maybe 10% done. And they had one developer who was incredibly sweet. She seemed very put together, but she kept missing deadlines continuously. And the particular software that she was using was one that wasn't really difficult to show work in progress along the way. So I was constantly asking if it was due a week or 2 weeks, and she was continuously telling me that she didn't have anything to show me yet. And then she admitted that she had fallen behind, and then she listed a whole bunch of different reasons for why. So because I had been doing this for a while, I understood that meant that she actually wasn't as technically savvy as she needed to be for that role. I knew that that meant that she wasn't the developer that we needed for this project, and we were never going to get across the finish line if she was the only person doing the development. And so I was able to put together that decision brief that I brought to the executives. We were able to get a phenomenal, she was a consultant. We were able to bring in a phenomenal consultant. And within 6 months, we went live and the project was hugely successful. So how do you think the executives trusted me after that? On future projects, I had far more ability to scale up and down the team than I needed because they had trust that I knew what each project needed in order to be successful. Now, the other thing is project managers can be too far from the organization as well. If the only time you're interacting with executives is in those big executive meetings, you're missing context. So sometimes you can tee up the most perfect decision for your leaders, and they can tell you, we absolutely cannot do that because of, and then insert reason here. We can't do that because we don't have the budget for it. We can't do that because we don't have the, there might be political considerations. There might be, bargaining unit considerations. There might be, they might know that someone's going to be leaving soon or retiring soon that's not allowed to be public information yet. So we have to take that information. We go back to our organization, our project team members, and we explain, hey, this was a great idea. We can't do it. We're going to do another one of the options, or we need to come up with a different plan. And then we go back through, the decision-making workflow on that. And so it's important because the more you learn about that, the better you can take that into consideration before you make recommendations going forward. And you need to be very open to that. We had an instance of this at an organization where the team was really wanting to make a change with how we did time cards. And they put together a beautiful decision brief and use case. And they asked for an audience with the steering committee. They came to the steering committee, and I was on their side. I thought some of the functionality in the time cards was a little overly cumbersome, and I was excited for them to see if it could be stricken from future development. When they got to the steering committee said, "Oh, we actually need it for auditing purposes. There's certain reports that we have to do. There's actually state regulations that this meets the requirement for, so we actually have to keep it in." And what was brilliant about that, it was all respectful, but the conversation was over and it was easy. And that team understood what they had to do. They could still be frustrated with having to do it, but they felt heard, they felt understood, they understood the perspective of the organization, and it was no longer something we had to talk about. The decision was made, and certainty helps with clarity, and clarity builds momentum. Incomplete decision briefs. You can call these anything you want, but when you are giving your decision to your executives, you have to think of every question that they might ask ahead of time so that you don't delay the decision-making process. Sometimes as project managers, we feel like because some of these things feel obvious to us, we're in it. We're in the thick of it. So sometimes it feels like some of the data that goes into these decision briefs should be relatively obvious, but they're not. And that goes back to your executive being potentially too far removed from the project. So you have to create a story in your decision brief that makes it very easy for your executive to understand the journey that your decision took to get to their desk, and really make it easy to see what the obvious or best decision is. And you have to ensure that your team has helped to craft that and supports the recommended decision. And you need to make sure that leaders can defend the decision later. There was another statistic that came out that said that leaders now, I think it was something like 50% more need to defend their decisions. So you need to arm them because everyone reports to somebody, no matter where you are. Everyone reports to somebody. So you have to be able to defend those decisions. And I have examples of this. What you want to do though is you want to create alignment. So you want to make sure that your team has had a chance to contribute to, review, give feedback to your decisions. So you have one-on-one conversations with your individual team members if you need to, working sessions with them as you build a decision brief, cross-functional perspectives, impact discussions. And the goal is not necessarily to have consensus. You can have differing views of it. That's why it's a decision. It could be option A or option B or option C. But the goal is ensuring the recommendation has been shaped by the expertise and the concerns and the insights of the people closest to the work. Unless sometimes you can't do that because it's about the team themselves, and I'm sensitive to that. Sometimes it's your perspective on how the team is working, and you need to take that directly to the executive. But if it's something in relation to the project scope or the timeline changes, those you should make sure that you're not giving your leadership a decision brief. You're obviously you can give them your opinion, but you should not be sharing a formal decision brief without having it go through the appropriate channels first. And because you have an understanding of and a respect for human nature, you work very well with your team members and you're able to say, great, we have a few decisions now. Sometimes it's very easy to say this is the right one. Sometimes you do have to say, hey, the team's divided. Here's a couple of different options. And you're bringing that to your decision. You're bringing that to your decision maker to do. We had a use case at Toyota where one of the user experience designers got a little inventive and put together some screens that were out of scope, but they were very cool and everyone got really excited about them. So we scoped out what the development would be, including testing, including all of the other components that go with it, the increase in project management time. And we brought it to the executive and we said, here's a couple of things that we can do. We recommend doing this because, and we talked about the experience that the end users would be able to get from this once we did it, but it's going to cost this, it's going to delay the go live by this many days, it's going to cost this much more money, or we can reduce the go live if we bring on another team member, we can reduce the delay in go live if we bring on another team member, but that's going to cost this much money. So we really outlined, and then of course the bottom was, or we can just keep it the way it is, no additional money, we still go live at the time in which we said we were. And then I had a one-on-one meeting with her before to pre-brief her. And then we had a decision-making meeting and we actually decided to put it in to delay the go live and to actually do this new piece of functionality. But that was a decision she felt really good about making. It wasn't like, oh, we have to delay the go live. It was, oh, wow, we're adding something very exciting to this project. This is completely worth this is completely worth that. And so the anatomy of a decision brief, you have to add the context, how the problem originated, your situational context, the options, 2 to 3 impacts, pros, cons, realistic alternatives so the leaders can see the full landscape, the recommendations in recommendation order, including decisions considered but not recommended and why, when the decision is needed by, and what's dependent on it, how the decision will be actioned, when and how feedback will be provided, and future communication workflows. So in other words, oftentimes decisions have to go out and be tested. We want to do this. Let's go see what happens next. We had a really difficult decision to make once at Toyota when we had a site that was failing. It would actually go offline. So there was what was considered to be some kind of data leak in it. I would like to say that happened before I got there. It was one of the projects I came in to rescue. And it was a site that was used by 25,000 of the Toyota sales team members, they're in their showrooms. And it had gotten to the point where we were restarting the server once a week in an effort to keep the website from going down at random times. And so when I sat with the team, we asked, we can't do this forever. Like, this is not, restarting the server once a week is not a viable option. And they said, well, if you give us some time to build some scripts, we can add that in one of our maintenance releases. We need to let it fail. And if we let it fail, then we can write scripts that track error logs. We can see where the problem is, and then we can go fix it. So I had to go to the executives and say, we're going to need to let this fail. In our next maintenance pack, we're going to put in these error scripts, and then we're just going to let it go. We'll have to turn it back on when it happens. We'll have to let the sales folks know this might happen, but then we can fix it once and for all. And then we did. We found out exactly where the data leak was. We put a patch in to fix it. And from there on, it worked great. Do you think that executive was happy with that decision? Absolutely. Okay. And this goes into and this trails right into decision making by ambush. So, and I've done this, I have been guilty of this, where you get to the meeting and you tee up a decision usually tied to some kind of risk, and you put the leader on the spot and you say, what should we do? And they're in a room full of people. And I have been told before, don't ever do that to me again. So that goes back to increasing the visibility, working with people. You're going to get leaders on the defensive. Decisions are going to get delayed. You might have stakeholder debates in the meeting because maybe you didn't do the appropriate alignment beforehand. So you need to take the time to ensure that alignment. You need to give your team members, you need to give your executives a chance to weigh in with you one-on-one, a chance to perhaps make some changes to the briefs before it goes before a large audience. Because if you do ambush in an executive decision-making meeting, that affects your credibility. That impacts your executive's ability to trust you. So you want to make sure you're never giving an important decision in a meeting for the first time without some context for it. We had an RFP process, and we worked very hard to make sure that before everyone got to the meeting where we were making the final decision, they had everything they needed. They felt comfortable, not to influence the decision, but to ensure the comfortability with the decision. What else do you need? What questions do you still have? What information do you still feel like, you want a chance? Is there things that you kind of want to make sure that you've talked about with someone to make sure you fully understand the impact of it? And we did a roadshow, one-on-one meetings. We did mini group task force meetings. By the time we got to the RFP decision meeting, it was unanimous because people really understood. People understood the decision they were making, all of the factors that were going into it. So you don't use those large group meetings to create alignment. Those meetings confirm alignment. It is very hard to build alignment in a group meeting where people don't have enough of that context, where people don't have enough of the visibility. The other one, and this one's big for me, leaders manage projects like departments. Departments and projects are very, very different. You need experts on your projects. You have very fixed timelines on projects. In departments, you can train as you go, initiatives, that can maybe get spread over different quarters or different years. If you need to make changes, you have time to talk about those changes fully. You don't have that on projects often. You are making decisions at the speed of light sometimes. And there is chaos, but there can be calm in the chaos. There can be clarity in the chaos. But if you have project leaders who are not as familiar with projects, they may be more inclined for stability, for consensus, for familiarity, for certainty. And sometimes you cannot offer that on a project. Sometimes you have to make decisions with the information that you have, and you may not be 100% certain. So your job is to educate your leaders on what it means to be in a project, translate project reality into business impacts. Explain your risks through storytelling. Use examples from past projects, both within that organization and whatever you have from your own projects. So we were working on a project bringing 5 campuses into a single recruitment system. And this was something brand new to them. We were bringing, HR folks in, and we were teaching them how to configure a cloud-based system. And some took to it very quickly. Some needed more training, but it was a lot of work to configure entire recruitment workflows. We had a vendor implementation manager, and she was working on multiple other projects. We were one of 3 clients for her. She was coming to meetings, kind of helping, not really helping, and we were starting to fall behind. But our go live was very important because we had another wave of campuses to roll on to next. This go live was our line in the sand. And that's that triple constraint. The timeline could not move. Therefore, others, we had to make sure that we were in alignment with that. And you can educate your executives on that. So I told our team, we need the vendor to bring in a full-time implementation manager to sit down one-on-one with all of these different team members, help do the configuration for them, and train them as they go, as opposed to just trying to teach them, let them do it, test it, it didn't work, train them again, let them do it, test it, it didn't work. We were in a never-ending cycle. So that goes back to human nature. Is it likely we were going to get them all trained as experts in time for the go live? No. So then the question to executives becomes, what is our ultimate objective? Is our ultimate objective to have experts on this within our own organization, or to meet our go live? Because right now they're mutually exclusive. We are not going to get these folks trained in time to meet our go live. So we can have a vendor expert come in, do the configurations, train them as they go, and then help them to maintain it once it's live. And that decision was made, and we went live. And it was fantastic. He stayed on for, I think he stayed with us for almost 6 months to help us out. He ended up getting a promotion after that. He was a true lifesaver, and that was such a good decision to be made. We could not treat this like a department. We had to treat it like a project. And lastly, of course, the decision flow. So again, we saw the hierarchy at the beginning. We have to establish that decision flow. What decisions can the project team just make on their own? They don't have to go through a roadshow for it. What decisions can a department make on their own? And you have examples of that. Department managers can make these decisions. Project team members can make these decisions. These are what have to go to a steering committee. This is what ultimately needs a sponsor sign off. So you're not escalating too many decisions. You're not creating bottlenecks. Once the decisions are made, often you'll have, if we had a steering committee meeting, we would have a project team meeting the next day. So we could break down what came out of that meeting. We didn't wait for the next week when tons of other things had happened. We had a meeting specific to, okay, here's what was decided in the steering committee meeting. Here's what we have to do next. And we would triage. And then before the steering committee meeting, we would have a team meeting to say, hey, here's all the things that we did. Here's how they've been working. Here's what didn't work. Here's what needs to change. Here's what's happening next. Any of that data. And we would include that then in the steering committee conversation. And if anything was truly pertinent in an effort to not ambush, we would have those one-on-one meetings ahead of time. So we go from leaders too far to the work to visibility. We go from incomplete decision briefs to decision framing, storytelling. We go from decision-making by ambush to alignment. From leaders managing projects like departments to project leadership. Real, true project leadership, innovation, momentum, and decision flows break down, you have now decision governance. So projects don't build momentum from effort. They build it from clarity, ease, synergy, understanding. And we have done entire webinars on just, those invisible structures, those communication workflows, and decisions were part of that. But decisions are an art form and a beast unto themselves. All right, so what do you do when you have certain types of leaders that are inaccessible? These are the three most kind of painful leaders. I'm slammed this week. Can I wait until next week? Part of that, again, is educating them on projects versus departments. You have to schedule regularly scheduled meetings with them. You have to make sure you're anticipating as many decisions as possible. So you're having those meetings far earlier. If you need a decision a month or 2 from now, you're bringing that forward in an effort to make sure they know that it's coming. And you're building that alignment before you get there. And then it's okay sometimes if you have a very inaccessible leader to try to build some relationships with other trusted advisors, not to go behind their back, but because you're trying to keep as many of the pieces moving forward as you can. So you're getting, and you're making sure your leader knows that, hey, I met with, this person, this department head, we decided to go take pieces of this and go on this direction. We just need one final decision on this. And sometimes sometimes people are more thorough when they're reacting to something. And so the fact that you've already made certain decisions could cause an emotional reaction, and have them respond to you and kind of understand more of the urgency of it. All transparent, nothing, all of it is in an effort to make sure that you're continuing to build momentum on your projects. The conflict avoidant leader. I don't really want to push this through. Decisions linger, risks grow. This is a true morale killer. This one is very hard for morale because we need to trust our leaders to fight the fights they need to fight for our projects. And if they don't, and we're sitting in a state of inaction, that is very hard. Or they're making bad decisions in an effort to not have to face a conflict. That's even worse. So sometimes what that means is we have to resolve as many conflicts as possible behind the scenes. So it becomes incumbent on us to go build those relationships, to build that alignment. So maybe if there's conflict with another team, you start doing the work with individual team members. I even hosted something once on a project called the Frustration Fireside Chat. I said, okay, let's just do it. Bring all your frustrations. We're going to work through them all in this meeting because we actually have work to do. And we need to get on the other side of these. And let's see what we can work on together. And that way we're bringing leaders solutions. So we're not just saying, hey, here's a conflict. I need you to go work with these people. Here's what I think you should do. You're saying, hey, I was able to work through some of these conflicts. And I think, the team and I were able to kind of get to this good place. Is this something that you think you can take and run with? That's a lot of work on your end for someone that, should be able to do that given the position that they have. And then the last one is the misinformed leader. This one is my most frustrating. So this is a person who doesn't have enough information, has made assumptions on information that they have. Sometimes they're that hierarchical leader and they stay kind of far removed from the day-to-day, and they're filling in their own gaps. They're making assumptions about who's a good team member. They're making assumptions about how the systems are being used. And they're very confident in their assumptions. They're very confident in what they think they know, and they have misaligned priorities, conflicting direction, and that also really hurts the morale of an organization because they are often making low quality decisions for your project. And it's very hard to look a leader, to sit right across from a leader and say, you're wrong. That's not accurate. Now, sometimes you can, and sometimes the data speaks for itself. The best thing to do in that instance is to make sure that in meetings where there are multiple people, you are teeing up those facts from another project stakeholder or business leader, functional user, and you're doing it in support of the whole group. So it doesn't necessarily call, one person out. And I have found very quickly alignment shifts because that leader does not want to be the only one who didn't understand that. Now, sometimes they absolutely are misinformed by just pure accident or, just a general misunderstanding. And they're often very willing to, say, oh, I misunderstood that. That's fine. That's different. You can work with that. That's very different from a person who wants to push back on you when they are misinformed. And with all of these leaders, there's a lot of work that you can do to kind of project manage in support of the challenges. What I don't always suggest doing is going above their head. I have tried that before when it was really necessary, and I would say the majority of the time, the leaders that your leaders report to have pretty good relationships with those leaders, and oftentimes there's not a lot that changes, and it doesn't necessarily look good for you. So that was one of the options. Another option, of course, is to just continue with business as usual, where you're doing a lot of extra work in support of some of the leaders' shortcomings. And of course, the third option is you can always look for another job. You can always you can take what you need from the position that you have, learn what you need to learn, become more clear around the type of organization that you want to work with, the type of leader that you want, and you can go out there in search of organizations that have those really strong leaders. So here is your checklist. I'm going to check the time here. Fantastic. All right. Executive readiness. Does the leader have enough context to make the decision? And in the guide we're going to send you, we have tons of these. Does the leadership understand the trade-offs? Have I had enough one-on-one conversations before bringing this forward? PM readiness. Do I understand the organizational culture surrounding this? Have I vetted this decision with the right stakeholders and the right project team members? What examples can I draw on? How do I frame this story? Have I established a clear decision-making framework? Is everyone coming to this meeting prepared for the conversation and decision being requested? And have I drafted a clear and comprehensive enough decision brief? There's a much more comprehensive checklist, but these are the types of things that you can be asking yourself before you actually present to your executives. And now I have talked largely in this around project management expertise. So if anyone out there watching this is a new to project management or entry-level project management, you have not necessarily built that expertise yet. So what do? And this is the stage, right? There's a natural ability. There are natural-born project managers. Raw material you're born with: intelligence, curiosity, problem-solving skills. The PM 101 stuff you can always be taught, right? How to build a project plan, how to do a status report. That's kind of what I would bucket into some of that project coordinator type of work. Very important on a project. That's that project hygiene. And then organizational context. So this is what you kind of build through the people that you're working with. Who do you learn from? Who to align with? Who to bring in early? This is where you start to grow your emotional intelligence. This is where you start to really see the patterns of people. How people, you start to see how people react. You present information, everyone has a very negative reaction to it. Oh, well, now you take that in the future. Okay, now I know in the future people are likely to react this way. Or if you're I was just sitting in a testing meeting recently, and I saw that people were getting confused. I know exactly what I would do to change those test scripts now. I know exactly, I know exactly where the gap was. And then I can make those changes very quickly. And from there, you build your expertise. So that becomes your gut. That becomes your good judgment. And you learn that from mistakes and lessons learned and really good successes, aligning yourself. So you want to align yourself with project leaders, even good and bad project leaders. I learned a lot from bad project managers too over time. I'll be honest with you. When you see people make mistakes, you're like, okay, I know not to do that. And I've also learned from incredible problem solvers. Sometimes it wasn't even project managers. It was department leaders. It was, assistant directors, everything down to analysts, just watching the way that people work and really absorbing that. You build that expertise and you can lean on them. And what I would advise to those who are just starting in project management is don't overinflate intelligence with experience. You can be incredibly smart and still have so much to learn. So I want your ideas. I like pushback from my team, as long as you're willing to be taught and to be coached. As long as you're willing to allow me to say, we're not going to do that, and here's why. And I'll always tell you why, and I will always turn it into a training. What I struggle with sometimes is people with not a lot of experience continuously trying to push. So make sure you are humble enough to know what you don't know and to want to learn that for yourself, because it's an exciting career. It is a fun career. And I have a fun anecdote for you. My mom had this on her fridge for years. A man in search of truth and happiness goes to a wise man, and he says, "Wise man, how does one gain a good life, true happiness? And the wise man says, good judgment. And the man goes, yeah, but how do you get good judgment? And the wise man goes, experience. And the wise man goes, okay, and the man goes, okay, well, what's the best way to gain experience? And the wise man says, bad judgment. So go out there and try things. Be willing to learn from them. Be willing to learn from the people around you. In summary, what experienced project managers do insistently is constant meetings, building those decision briefs, so taking the time to socialize recommendations. You're in essence a marketing person. You're selling in what you need on this project. You're storytelling, and you're helping executives make quick decisions. Project success is largely a function of decision quality. Look how happy she is. Her project's going fantastic. All right. Please download our guide. We want to hear from you. You can click this link here, the Executive Decision-Making Guide. It goes over everything we covered here today. We'll be making refinements to it so we can resend it to you. But it's everything that you need in order to arm your toolkit, fill your toolkit with decision-making, with quality, timely, effective decisions on your projects. And next, I am very excited to announce this. This is the first time I'm announcing it. We are in the process of actually building a community for project managers and project team members for a community for conscious leadership. So a lot of the communities that I have been a part of, and I love them all, and I'm still a part of them, they focus on professional growth, or they focus on the personal growth, your core values, your purpose, your nervous system, or building a community. And other community things that we do, outside of our professional work. And what I learned for myself is when I focused on all of them, like levers going up and down, I was doing my internal work. I was focusing on leadership and career growth, honing my project management skills, building a sense of community out there. It was like the tide that rises all the ships at once. They're all connected. And so this community is going to offer so much. We're going to have workshops, open office hours, guest experts, goal groups, for those of you who have specific goals that you want to work on, productivity sessions, which I love. If anyone's familiar with the Pomodoro sessions, we'll be hosting a podcast. We'll be continuously putting out new resources and ebooks. So we can go from a project management training one day, an AI training, to a breathwork session. Does yoga make you better at project management? Yes, it can. And we want to help shape the whole person. So if you're interested in this, we're putting the link to this in the chat. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to start building a community together. All right. Are there any questions? All right, I have some questions here. I will be very candid. I am not seeing questions that come through LinkedIn on this, but I have someone helping funnel them to me, so thank you so much. What's your approach when leadership priorities keep shifting? That's a great question. Sometimes what I've said is one of a project manager's best traits is the ability to stop a moving train. It is really hard to stop a moving train. But sometimes you need to pause and say, if we keep going this way, and then we have to go this way, and then we have to go this way, we're burning too much. The team is too stressed. We don't understand what we're doing. Morale is dropping. There's too much rework. Can we take a minute and figure out what direction we really need this to go in? Can we take a step back holistically? Can we do a roadshow internally, and then can we take that to our steering committee and our project sponsors and say, with some degree of confidence, what is the best thing for us to be working on right now? What makes the most sense for our project And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, we need clarity because we need clarity for momentum. What's one thing you've seen great project managers do that instantly builds executive trust? Ooh, great question. Love that. Okay. There's a couple of aspects of this. The only way to gain trust, the only way, and there's a trust matrix, and it starts with competency, and then it goes to character. So the way to build trust is to make sure you're taking the time to understand before you're making recommendations, to understand the culture, the people you're working with, to understand the strategic goals and objectives, to understand the priorities, to understand the personalities of the people that you're working with, so that when you're making recommendations, you're making ones that can truly be done within your organization. Then you're given your set of tasks to carry out. Decisions are made, you execute against them. Execution is so important. The way to build trust is to do what you say you're going to do, bring it back for feedback, refine it as you need to, and then your team will start to trust, your executives will trust that you are in support of them and in support of the project. So that goes back to not ambushing them. That goes back to having regular meetings with them. You get to a point where they feel comfortable taking your feedback, but you show them that you're very comfortable to take you're comfortable taking their feedback. And then one other very important thing, and this is very tactical, is closing communication loops. Oftentimes, you'll get a decision or you'll get an action, you'll go do it, and then it's a closed action item and it falls off the list. And so there's always that feeling of like, did we have other things that we were talking about before? And you say, oh yeah, we just did it, so we closed it. Show what's been closed, show what's been done, and give people a chance to say, oh, you did do that, but I have additional things that need to be done, or we actually need to give that to this department, or it's just done, it was great, thank you. That helps people feel comfortable with the work that's being done. Do executives value data or storytelling more when making decisions? It has to be both. With data, raw data can often lead to multiple possible decisions. We could do this, we could do this, or we could do this. Sometimes the decisions are simple enough where the raw data is what you need, but you need to help them understand what possible outcomes there are, what the data actually means, especially in relation to the people that are in your organization. You might do, recommendation A at one organization, and you might do recommendation B at another one. I've worked in private and public organizations. I will handle things differently within a private institution than I will do within a public institution. The communication workflows are different. The impacts of decisions are different. For-profit and, not-profit organizations, very different. I understand the leaders and what it is that they need in order to feel safe to make decisions. So I'm not saying be overly emotional. I'm just saying make sure that they have a very clear understanding of what needs to be done based on the data. What skills do you think will become most important for project managers over the next few years? Human nature. We have a lot of tools now to help with things like the data. We have a lot of tools now to build PowerPoint presentations. We have tools. I would definitely say you definitely want to stay current with innovation. But what's going to become the most important is how to use that in support of people. I have worked on projects from just a simple Excel spreadsheet all the way through to and maybe a Microsoft project to, the fully fleshed out Asana or Monday or Smartsheets or Jira. I've worked on all of them. They matter less than the actual people who are going to be using them. You have to make sure that you're building an infrastructure based on how your team is actually going to use it. You can try to build it based on how you want them to use it, and that is entirely dependent on how much authority you have. If you're working with clients, that is going to be very difficult. If you're working with external departments, that's a toss-up. So you can have all of the tools, you can build in the workflows. You have to make sure that you really have a deep understanding and respect for the people on your team. Chuck said, from project manager to influential PM. Yes, you are. You're marketing. Yeah, and to go back to emotions, and then we'll wrap this up here because I know we're a little bit over. Everyone is emotional. I think unless, there could be exceptions to that rule, but we all have emotions within us. And, we all have seen even the most stoic of people have emotional responses to things. That is normal. It is to be expected. It is data in and of itself. When you have an emotional reaction to something, when someone has emotional reaction to something, that's data. That's a tipping point. That means it's time to start figuring out where you as a PM, where your team members need to be in more support of those leaders. A leader who gets upset, who yells, who gets visibly frustrated, that's emotion. I call those adult temper tantrums. That's not emotion. So we need to take from that, okay, well, what can I do in an effort to serve and in an effort to support and in an effort to make sure that in the future I've thought about everything that's needed so that, the decisions become easier for them to make, but also, especially now, as people are being held more accountable for their decisions, safer for them to make, defendable in the future. Any more questions? Hey, all right. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate everyone. We will be in touch with you soon for the next one. And we look forward to seeing you in our community in the future. Have a fabulous Wednesday.